I now have for you the video that does give us a lot more insight into a story we covered already, which was Joe Scarborough and Michael Steele clashing in a pretty significant way on air over Michael Steele's perception that Joe Scarborough and Mika were advocating a level of civility and passiveness that Steele wasn't okay with when it comes to confronting and addressing MAGA. And this is particularly notable in the wake of that meeting that Trump had, I should say, with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. Mika and Joe say that's not indicative of a shift. We just wanted to sort of meet him and talk to him and get a read on him. And I've tried to give the best nuanced perspective on that as I can, because I'm not wanting to jump to, we now fully denounce anyone who does something we disagree with on our own side, but also see and have made some of the criticisms directed towards them and how they brought that forward and some of what they've said since. So, with that being said, when I covered this previously, Michael Steele, as one little correction, I think I called him the former DNC chair, which confused the person who titled the video, describing him as a Democrat. Now he's associated with Democrats because of his anti-Trump stances, but he actually used to be the RNC chair. And we discussed this back and forth. And as the debate went on, I remember even saying when we originally covered this, I think this may be directed towards Mika more because of something she said that we didn't have in this viral clip. Now we have the video that we missed previously of what she said that sort of prompted Michael Steele's point here. So let's examine it and then give our take. Again, the context is, if you missed this, that Joe and Mika have correctly been very outspoken against Donald Trump for some time and described his fascistic tendencies. So then when they traveled to Mar-a-Lago for what appeared to be a far too friendly meeting, not that you can't meet with bad people and maybe confront them or read them, but it felt in its presentation far too friendly and a little bit of violation of what they had said on air. That's what got them a lot of backlash. They're now struggling with a lot of their audience abandoning them because of that. And I think this is really important to examine as a subject because it represents and it brings to the forefront a very real conflict within our side. That's an oversimplification, but sort of those pushing back against Trump's bad principles and advocating for better ones. There's a real strife of how do we do that? What level of civility is the word they get into it over here? And how do we speak about how aggressive, how passive? All of that's a real debate. And I think diving into the Joe and Mika conflict that's going on right now on air with some of their guests and just with their own audience serves an opportunity to really discuss that. So here's what we talked about already, this clip. Then we'll get to the video that I missed from Mika Brzezinski.
Slapped down Eileen Cannon twice before, because it's just bogus rulings on her part. And they,
by the way, while you watch this, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate this show.
They're going to honor that judicial responsibility. Supreme Court decision yesterday. Okay. All right. But I don't see the Supreme Court addressing the fact that one of its justices had an improper conversation.
Michael, I'm not saying we're walking in a winter wonderland.
Joe, you had your moment. Let me just finish the point.
I know, but
I get
tell
that.
us something we don't know.
Well, I'm telling you something that you seem to forget. And
so
let me make my point. You may not like it, but I'm going to make it. And the reality of it is, I take your civility argument, and you like to say 78 million people voted for Donald Trump. Well, 82 million people voted for Joe Biden.
Right.
And he didn't get that civility that you're talking about from Donald Trump in those 4 years.
Right.
So now the expectation is, because he's won again and he got 78 million people, we all got to be civil to Donald Trump. Well, okay, I'm prepared to be civil.
Nobody said that.
You did.
No, I didn't say
I
did. So I didn't say everybody has to be civil.
The reality of it is, you're saying,
So we can come back and remind ourselves of more of that in a second here. But you heard, and this is what I wish was included in the viral clip that I know a lot of people responded to. You heard Mika say, I said that. And this is what I think she was referring to the video that we missed previously of her setting up what then Michael Steele was reacting to. And it does add some insight into what he's then responding to.
But similar to the conversation that was had after we had our meeting with Trump. And a lot of people said, you said all these things about him, and then you went to meet with him. Yes, and yes. Two things can be true at the same time, and you still can be very concerned about the things that you have actually voiced. And I think that you should never stop trying for civility and progress. And I think there needs to be some sort of reset to figure this out.
Yeah, so, let's get back in a second. Now knowing that's what she said, that definitely was the point Michael Steele was responding to. That's where the word civility came from, her saying that. We should never stop trying towards that, and we need a reset. You know, it's interesting. I really do want to be more level-headed than I've seen some people be in response to the recent goings-on of the Morning Joe peeps, because I don't like this inclination on our side of immediately tossing people out or eating each other alive because of things we perceive as mistakes or bad calls. I'd be ready if I saw a huge shift in all their coverage to call that out. But the very controversy that caused the big backlash, I don't want to overreact to it and play into that everyone's denouncing everyone and then we just rip our side apart. But I will say, so with that being said, I do want to make clear here though, it is really weird to say we need a reset. That's exactly what I said this can't be about. And this is where I start to get aligned with some of the people who have more strong reactions to that meeting and to the stuff that followed. If you are operating under the assumption or the belief that post-election, because Trump won, we need to sort of reset and approach with a completely clean slate. That's what I said even before I knew she was going to say this. In past segments, I said, you just can't be saying we should clean the slate, because that doesn't make any sense. You don't spend 8+ years learning about a person just to wipe that clean. Just to go, you know what? From now on, as I said in the past segment, if you do one bad thing, that's going to be your first bad thing. And I will give them credit. We've talked about this on the bonus show. They still are speaking out against Trump on stuff. It's not like now they're a Trump channel. They're still doing liberal coverage that means that's anti-Trump often. So that's not at all, if anyone's telling you that's what's happening, that's not what's happening. But I do see a little bit of a tonal shift, a little addition of some passiveness that wasn't there before. Doesn't mean they aren't sometimes aggressive. And if on air things are being discussed like they aren't a part of a history with this guy and his movement, that is so wrong. That's not how you approach this. And that was my fear from a lot of people of sort of, well, now that he's won, let's not call him any words, or let's not speak to what we should be fearful of in his governance, or let's not assume that if he followed through on his promises, they'd be as bad as we've previously learned they could be. And that is how you guarantee the last years were wasted, okay? Because if we got anything from the last few years, it was preparation for how to speak about and how to confront Trump and his movement. Now, let me give my second part after watching more of this.
No, you're using the term civil. I've never used that term. I'm using your term. You put civility on the table.
You said we all have to be civil. There is a pushback that you have to have.
But Joe,
I'm just talking about Barack Obama.
But I'm just saying. But I'm saying. I'm not. Fine. I'm not talking about that. My main point is everybody's looking at this from a one-way perspective. How we need to approach Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. How the hell is he approaching us?
Yeah.
Right? The man wants to lock up citizens. The man wants to turn the government against them. How are we to respond to that? Are we supposed to be civil?
Michael, do you think we don't know that?
Doesn't seem like it.
Michael, why do you...
Not you. I'm just saying the
Michael,
broader you.
Okay, and then we reviewed the rest of the clip already. But, see, it's so tough. And I know I keep saying this, but it's so tough to articulate a criticism that is based on tone and urgency. Because that is really stretchy and abstract, I admit. And so I think that's why it's hard for Michael Steele. If you say one specific argument, it's going to be easy for both of them to go, we acknowledge that. Because they have acknowledged Trump's threats against the media and all that. True. They've been subject to those threats. But when you have this, we've opened lines of communication, which again, media outlets communicate with Putin, understanding how terrible he is, but just trying to get information. I'm not saying any individual act here inherently is wrong. But how it's then being included in these discussions and how I'm hearing them say, we should always be trying to be civil. As someone who's extra civil, I describe myself as, I really try to be pretty, y'all see me talk with people at rallies. I try to be pretty nice, even if I'm disagreeing with them. It's weird. It's strange. You're gonna be always trying towards civility and also clicking reset. Trump's not clicking reset. To Michael Steele's point, he's not approaching civility. We don't want to stoop to his level. So it's not that we want to be as bad towards him as he is towards us necessarily. But are we going to keep trying and making concessions and pleading with a movement that's not even going to try with us to be civil? It feels, as abstract as this is to say, it does feel like that's a little bit where she's coming from. And I do think that one term, and maybe she'd take it back if she were discussing this with me, I don't know, of sort of reset finally clarifies what it is that I think is wrong about how they're approaching this. If they think in their head, like, we kind of need to just take a breath, reset, start new. No, because then we would not know about and thus act accordingly based off of the horrible things Trump has done and said. How do we interpret Zuckerberg's recent kissy to Trump, Bezos's recent stuff, etc.? How do we interpret that if we don't already have an understanding of what Trump has been doing in terms of threats against those folks? And actually, since I brought it up, I do want to talk about that a little bit. As I've mentioned in past segments, we're in a frightening time where all of these powerful people are bending the knee to Trump. Media reports Jen Rubin brutally shreds the Washington Post while announcing, that sounds like a YouTube title, brutally shreds the Washington Post while announcing her exit. I was about to make more jokes about that. Bent the knee to Trump. According to, now let's skip forward here. X strategy chosen by Jennifer Rubin for her resignation from the Washington Post, where she has penned an opinion column since November 2010. So been at the Washington Post for a while, this journalist. Initially making waves as a contrarian conservative voice among her other more left-leaning colleagues, but then her viewpoint evolved as she opposed Trump. And it's Trump and Trumpism that formed the breaking point for Rubin's tenure at the Post, specifically including the management decisions made by billionaire owner Jeff Bezos as he bent the knee to Trump. And I want to read you some of what she had to say as she's announcing that she's leaving the Washington Post. And for her, the tipping point was Bezos putting his finger on the scale and doing so because he was bending the knee to Trump. If we start anew, reset, and actively work. Not that we can't have some basic level of civility norms. Again, I always think you can speak in a way, especially interpersonally, that has some respect to it, even if it's confrontational. But let's actively work in a way that they're not, to be more and more civil, when, if we understand the goings on of Trump over the last years, it's proven we should be probably not wasting a bunch of energy on that. And here she writes, rather than anti-Trump, the founders describe their venture as pro-democracy. This is the new thing that now, of course, I'm blanking. Jennifer Rubin is starting, called The Contrarian. But there are names well known for their criticism of the incoming 47th president. Jeff Bezos and his fellow billionaires accommodate and enable the most acute threat to American democracy, Donald Trump, at a time when a vibrant free press is more essential than ever to our democracy's survival and capacity to thrive. The contradiction between, on the one hand, the journalistic obligation to hold the powerful accountable, and on the other, the financial interests of billionaire moguls and corporate conglomerates could not be starker. The Post's own headline, owned by Bezos, last month warned Trump signals plans to use all levers of power against the media. Press freedom advocates say they fear that the second Trump administration will ramp up pressure on journalists in keeping with the president-elect's combative rhetoric. And yet the Post's owner quashed a presidential endorsement for Trump's opponent, forked over $1 million for Trump's inauguration through Amazon, and publicly lauded Trump's agenda. Apologies. None of us could imagine Katharine Graham sending LBJ or Nixon a $1 million check. It would have been, as it is now, a fundamental betrayal of a great American newspaper. Defense of the First Amendment is incompatible with funding or cheerleading for the very person who seeks to drastically undermine the institution tasked with reporting on his coming administration. I know this is long, but just stick with me because this is super important. The Post's downfall is hardly unique. ABC, Mark Zuckerberg's Meta, and corporate-owned cable TV networks, which have scrambled to enlist Trump-friendly voices, are catering to powerful interests and have profound corporate conflicts. Instead of guarding their independence, they join financial leaders, politicians, and other public figures, currying favor with Trump and his orbit. Through classic anticipatory obedience, a dangerous but all too familiar pattern, they normalize the authoritarian menace. If Trump has taken attacks on the press to entirely new levels, softening the ground for an erosion of robust press freedom, as the Post reported, it is because he finds insufficient resistance. Instead, owners whose outlets he targets quite literally rewarded him. Perfectly said by Jennifer Rubin there. And a very good reason to leave the Washington Post and then I guess start her own venture. But I'm not saying that Mika and Joe are a part of that same cohort, because they're not actively cheerleading Trump. And I'm not asserting that at all. I know that's not the case, just so everyone knows. But I think their story has, the reason people are maybe so hypercritical, if they were curious, is because there's an environment where a lot of people are shifting. And you don't want to believe that's what's happening with any of the folks who've been consistently opposed to the values Trump represents. And the most egregious thing that we're seeing right now in reaction to the Trump victory are these people who have the power to make a difference, an owner of a major newspaper, withholding that newspaper's ability to endorse Harris back pre-election, as we talked about, and then going on to donate to Trump after him winning to his inauguration fund. The most public and active way to show some alignment with him, when previously your newspaper has identified how threatening he is. And so this is why, and it's not just about, or even majorly about Morning Joe. That's just one anecdote, one example that serves as an opportunity for us to explore how we best, in an environment where so many powerful folks are abandoning the opposition, how we properly speak about, interact with, and confront MAGA during this time where now they're going to attain quite a bit of power. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.